federal appeals court struck down Nasdaq's diversity disclosure rules for listed companies. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the SEC lacked the authority to approve the rule. The policy required companies to either include women and minority directors on their boards or explain why they had not done so. The rule was introduced in the wake of George Floyd's killing, which spurred companies to address racial inequality and promote DEI. Well, you know something? I would say, Rebecca, that this is something I'm not surprised about. When we talk about what's going on in the world of DEI, it seems to kind of follow the pattern of what we've been seeing. But certainly companies know that when they are diverse, they actually make more money. Studies have shown that, Rebecca.
Well, we know that when you're looking for intelligence, it has to be diverse. If it's all white, you're not going to have the most intelligent people in the world because you are specifically excluding about 90% of the world. When we know the total global population, less than 10%, I believe right now, is actually white. And so knowing that, it doesn't make good sense. It does. If you believe in capitalism, it definitely hurts the bottom line when there's a lack of racial and ethnic diversity. The other thing is we've seen studies in this country showing the potential trillions of dollars in losses because of racism in this country. So regardless of what our federal courts say, especially when it comes to DEI, regardless of what the incoming administration is going to say in DEI, companies have to look out for their bottom line, and their bottom line is about appealing to wide range of audiences and not just less than 10% of the entire global population.
Yeah, but Matt, here's the deal. We know that companies made promises during COVID. They made promises that aligned very closely with DEI. You might have this federal court appeals decision, but it seems like there's also some accountability that would happen, that can still happen when we talk about what was promised during the time that George Floyd was killed and protests were going on.
I think you're exactly right. And if you'll indulge me, I first have to brag. I learned about 10 minutes before we came on that my first ever argument at the Fifth Circuit, I won. So I got my opinion today. We won.
Oh, wow.
Hey. Count. And it was an issue of first impression, which means the law had literally never been argued. And thankfully, we prevailed. So speaking of federal appeals courts, today is one of the milestones in my career.
Congratulations.
There you go.
Part of that. Thank you. But to answer your question and to speak to that, you're 100% right. And look, here's the thing. Before George Floyd, we all saw the black version of McDonald's commercials and the other everybody else version of McDonald's commercials, right? Meaning, to Rebecca's point, they know that a diverse audience turns into more green for them. So this is problematic to not undergird those rules because, to her point, again, I've got to harken back on it. I mean, excellence is diverse. There are a lot of brilliant black people and brilliant non-white people who could serve on these boards. And here's one of the other things that's very important. The entree to these boards is extremely high in terms of what it takes to get on these boards, right? So striking down this rule creates a barrier of entry for people who would otherwise potentially not have access because of racism. And this is one of those things where, I don't know really what's behind the scenes, but unfortunately, we've learned about some judicial misconduct. So I wouldn't be surprised if the right people were whispering in the right judge's ears saying to go the wrong way, right, on this, because this is something that you would think is in conformity with what they said they were going to do with George Floyd. But frankly, that was my concern with a lot of those George Floyd pronouncements around that time and a lot of other people's, which is that it looked like it was purely capitalist greed and it was purely capitalizing on the topic du jour. And then on the back end, not doing what you said you were going to do and hoping that people forgot what you said you were going to do. So, it surprised me that that's the case, but there should be some accountability via us not buying certain products and, patronizing certain companies.
Yeah. And, Michael, this is one of those closed areas where if you were going to get on a board that generally will pay, especially in the six figures for you to be on there, a board where you have to know and network with all the right people. And we think about the limitations of access that African Americans have in the United States, they're not going to be on the board. I mean, you can look at most boards right now. There might be one, but there aren't 2 and 3. That is not how these boards operate. But it seems that this type of decision simply tracks. It tracks for what's going on in America and in the world right now.
Yeah, this is when we look at Project 2025, one of the aspects of Project 2025, one of the goals is to eradicate diversity, equity, and inclusion, basically at the federal level and federal programs. And this is a continuation of the backlash to the racial reckoning that took place after the death of George Floyd, May 25th, 2020. So we saw various corporations like Walmart make pledges of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, make pledges to make various types of changes, whereas a more diverse workforce, setting up various types of programs, et cetera. And now we see with Project 2025, we see with Republicans, we see this backlash taking place even during the Biden administration. And now that Trump has won and Republicans took back control of the Senate, we continue to see this backlash. We see with the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, it's a majority conservative circuit. OK, number one. And number two, to your point, when you have these various boards, they don't have this type of rule where these unqualified people can get on these boards, especially if you're African American. OK, so when we look at these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this is the new affirmative action, and this is the second part of the attack. The first part of the attack was the attack on critical race theory. Going back to 2022. Notice they're not talking about critical race theory so much now. The buzzword is diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you look at the dismantled DEI bill that was debated in the House of Representatives in a House Appropriations Committee, I think it was an oversight committee, one of those committees that Jasmine Crockett is on, a couple of weeks ago, you heard all this nonsense that Republicans were talking about attacking DEI. And how it's for unqualified people, things of this nature. And you also hear a lack of understanding of history of how we got here as well. So this is one of the reasons why elections have consequences. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Because if you don't understand history and the laws and policies put in place that brought us to where we are, you won't be able to see these threats when they're coming and be able to take the correct action to stop these threats.
Rebecca, here's what I also find most unsettling about this decision. The policy required companies to either include women or minorities or explain why they had not done so. And that is very crucial information in terms of, were they not finding the types of people that they needed to for the board? Or was there something else that was going on? It seems as though this was a rule that not only benefited people in terms of trying to figure out who to bring on the board, but finding out what was the disconnect and not being able to connect with those many, many qualified people that we know are out there.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It's going to disproportionately impact white women. So once again, white women has to take accountability for this, because I bet you there are more white women who got those slots than actual non-white people. Because we know when it comes to affirmative action programs, the number one beneficiary are white women because of the clause of women and or racial minorities. The other thing, going off of both Matt and Michael's points, is that this is also what whiteness is. Whiteness serves as a delusion that there is an inherent intelligence by simply being white. There is an inherent superiority or qualification because of whiteness. And we know that not to be true. And what's unfortunate is that requirement to actually articulate why you don't have racial minorities, why you don't have the inclusion of women, was to get people to actually challenge the thought that white is better than everything else.
Matt, I'll give you the final word on this. I understand that Nasdaq, there's going to be no appeals. This is it. This is acceptable. This is the decision. I guess that makes sense. Again, it's the culture which we are in.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where they're not going to appeal it because it benefits them because they can hook the homies up at this point, right? I mean, so let's just be honest, right? I mean, It doesn't surprise me that there won't be any appeals. It is yet another slap in the face because, when we went through that period immediately after George Floyd, there were a lot of people who I really highly respect who were like, don't fall for the okie doke. And what happened? Cats fell for the okie doke. And what happened? The okie doke came, right? A la what we're seeing and what we're seeing with the rollback of DEI and the all out assault on it. Not just the rollback, not just companies choosing not to honor their promises, but an all out assault and people jumping on board with said all out assault. So it doesn't surprise me that they're not going to appeal. But it also doesn't surprise me because it's corporations, or at least in this instance, connected to corporate greed and corporate, I don't know, the corporate oligarchy, if you call it that. And it doesn't surprise me that they're not going to lower a barrier of entry in terms of having rules that democratize and diversify their boards. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Tastes like Curl Prep Natural Hair Solutions at curlprep.com.
I'm in shock.
For curls, locks, braids, twists, and even those wigs and extensions. Women, men, and children are loving this line. Look at this video and you be the judge. People line up to see this product in action at hair shows, and when they take a seat and try it, they don't believe it's their hair. Buy the products at curlprep.com. It works on all hair types. Use code Roland, that's ROLAND, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. Parents, remove the ouch. You will love this system because you can comb the product through your child's hair with your fingers. It's all at curlprep.com. Use code Roland, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount.